Alrighty, y'all, no intro for this one because I like to test things with the algorithm. Let's get right into the video. So at the time of recording this, we're about 30 games into the season at this point, and we're starting to get an idea for how these younger players in the NBA are starting to develop. And one of the things that I thought would be interesting to look at is, now that we have a decent sample size, is we take a look back at what people were kind of projecting some of these rookies to be and comparing them to what kind of players they're actually turning into. This article here was written just before the NBA draft, and they were kind of taking like Victor Wembanyama. This is what we kind of see him becoming in terms of like a current NBA player. And so I'm very curious to see kind of what people were thinking at that time. And, you know, these guys have been on the court for a little bit now. They're turning into their own players. So let's kind of see where they're going with this. And it looks like they're going in alphabetical order. So Anthony Black was the first one. He ended up getting picked up by the Orlando Magic, obviously. He has been starting at point guard for them a little bit. So I'm curious to see. They see him as a combination of Scotty Barnes and Josh Giddey. Looks like they got the mock draft projection on him correct as well. And yeah, no, I actually think that that's a pretty good combination of players that Anthony Black has been so far. He's been a very, very nice defensive player. He hasn't shown a ton of like scoring virtues and everything, but I think that's kind of where the Josh Giddey part comes in, because he is a nice playmaker. He's an above average rebounder for his position, but again, he's out there primarily for defense, and I think that's where the Scotty Barnes mix comes in. He's a lot bigger than the average player at his position as well. I think he comes in at 6'6". Oh, they actually got him down at 6'7". Oh, wow. He doesn't look like that big on the court. That's interesting. But you see, he's only getting like the 5 points. He has been starting most of the season. Again, Markelle Fultz has been relatively unavailable, and they like having Cole Anthony off the bench. But he's been a big part of why like a lot of their defense has been so good this year. The 3-point percentage actually isn't like all that bad. He just doesn't shoot a ton. He's one of those guys that at this point in his career, he's just kind of taking his open shots, letting guys like the Franz Wagners, the Bancheros, and even like a Jalen Suggs or a Cole Anthony kind of take their shots first. He kind of gets whatever scraps come his way, and he's just trying to facilitate the team right now as the primary point guard. As far as like a ceiling for where we could see Anthony Black, I think like a Josh Giddey is like a good place for him to try and get right now. And Giddey's obviously still making a name for himself in the NBA. We're going to see what happens with his career and everything, obviously off the court stuff aside. But I think that's kind of where we're going to continue to see him develop. Maybe he becomes more of a scorer and everything. I guess this is kind of similar to when they took Elfrid Payton back in the day, but I think Anthony Black probably has a little more potential than Elfrid Payton did. All right, we got Grady Dick, who they compared to Kevin Huerter, and that's the stereotypical, we have a lengthy white shooter coming in, let's compare him to another lengthy white shooter. They projected him going to the Magic, which I'm really surprised they didn't take him with that, because I believe Grady fell, was it to 14 to Toronto or something? But they ended up going with Howard. So I don't know. I just feel like Grady Dick was like a little bit better pick. Not saying that Howard can't be that dude for them. He's kind of a similar thing where he's an above average athlete. He's a shooter, right? But I don't know. I just like Grady Dick's game a little bit more. Grady Dick primarily just kind of comes in for like cleanup minutes at this point. He's gotten a little bit of time in the G League and everything. You know, the Raptors got a lot of wings on their team. It's not someone they necessarily need right away. They're going to let him develop. His stats haven't been that great this year, but he's a guy that probably needs to be in the game for a certain amount of time to kind of get his flow going. That's what you find a lot of times with shooters, right? They have to get in and find their flow. But I don't think the comparison is such a bad thing. They are above average, like athletic players, don't have a ton of ball handling necessarily, play competent defense when they're in, but they're out there to be shooters, right? And so I would say Kevin Huerter is a fair comparison to where his career's been so far. And we'll just have to see as Grady Dick gets a few more minutes. All right, Scoot. Yeah, the comparison was always going to be Russell Westbrook, right? He's not much of a shooter, right? He's stupid athletic, got a stupid high motor and everything. Obviously, he's been a much less productive Russell Westbrook right now. Like he's not able to find many opportunities to get to the hoop right now. We've talked a lot about that on this channel, where I think having guys like Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton kind of in his way cause a lot of problems for him. He doesn't have a lot of guys that are great without the ball on his team. It's just a very congested and not well put together squad. And so I think it's still fair to say that a lot of the skills are there for Scoot, primarily because if he could ever get a chance to just go out and play in transition, we've seen that's where he's starting to be more effective, and you're starting to see a little bit of that now. But it's so hard to tell with Scoot right now because he's not in a situation like Westbrook was where he had Durant on his team right away and guys like Kevin Martin or something like that that are out spacing the floor so he can just go out there and run and do his thing. I was just actually reading something just before I started recording this where Scoot Henderson's like, yeah, man, I'm still trying to win Rookie of the Year and everything right now. Like, I still want to be that dude. Like, I don't think a guy with a motor like this is going to quit. I know people on the internet like to give up on people whenever they're not Luka Doncic right away coming into the league and just tearing everybody apart. But you have to give these dudes time to develop and stuff. And the situation matters so much. And like Portland rarely puts together anything competent on the basketball court. It's always just been Lillard. But no, once they kind of put a better team around him, if they put a better team around him, they've never been good at putting together a roster. I'd be curious to see if we could see a little more Westbrookness. Ooh, we got Derrick Lively next. The Brook Lopez comparison. Nope, that's not it at all. No, that's not it at all. Maybe like, no, I'm not even going to say young Brook Lopez because young Brook Lopez was like such a post scorer. He wasn't defensive oriented at all. That is a poor comparison. I feel like I remember like a little bit before the draft, people were saying like, oh, Derrick Lively shows like a little bit of life from three at times, but he only scored like, I want to say like 4, 5, 6 points per game in college. But the reason that you picked him is to be the run, jump, and dunk center. They had him going to OKC, which interesting mock draft projection. He went exactly where he needed to go in Dallas, where guys can just run pick and roll with him, throw it up to him. Otherwise, all he has to do is grab rebounds and block shots. You guys know those are my favorite type of centers. I love guys like that. I'm actually helping a team recruit a guy like that that's out in Canada right now. So a little bit of a project 7-footer, but that's not something we need to talk about anymore right now. No, this projection for Derrick Lively or this comparison was pretty off point. Who knows? Maybe he becomes Brook Lopez one day. I never thought that Brook Lopez would be the player that he is right now. He's changed his game up like completely. But right now, like if I had to compare him more to someone else, it's more of like a young Clint Capella type. So, but you know what? That's where he's most valuable, and guys like that are extremely valuable, especially if you're on the Dallas Mavericks. So, Derrick Lively's going the right way. Brandon Miller, Danny Granger. Okay, I'm kind of surprised they just didn't slap the Paul George label on him because that's what everybody said, and that's like his favorite player, right? Was Paul George. The Danny Granger one is interesting to me because that insinuates that he's not a very good ball handler. Like Danny Granger was like not necessarily the most athletic dude, and he didn't do a ton off the dribble, but he was like a lethal, lengthy shooter like Brandon Miller is. I think Brandon Miller has a lot more talent in his arsenal than he did. I'm looking at Brandon Miller's numbers so far this season, up to 15 points a game. That's awesome for a rookie. The 37% three-point percentage, I actually think is a lot better than people are probably giving him credit for. One, he's getting up quite a few attempts per game, and we've talked a bit on the channel about the Hornets and their we'll call it their play style. There's not a ton of options to get him like shots, like open shots, whereas maybe some other players have a few more opportunities. A lot of times the only way that he's getting set up for a shot is if a guy like a Terry Rozier or Gordon Hayward drives to the hoop or something like that and then kicks it out to him for a simple like I slid into a window, now I have an open three-pointer. That's not creating like shot opportunities for him like we always used to say with LeBron, right? We're like, oh, we threw Kyle Korver on the team. Kyle Korver's going to get so many opportunities off this. Like that's basic defensive rotations for teams. It's not that simple. Like yes, that's cool, but what are we doing to get Brandon Miller open and get him some shots? Because one of the ways that we're not seeing him be great right now is around the rim, but I think that'll be better as he maybe like bulks up a little more, gets a little stronger. He just looks like he's not quite sure he knows what he wants to do when he gets to the rim, at least in my opinion. So I think give him a little more time and everything, and you're going to see him have a much more diverse skill set similar to Paul George as compared to like a Danny Granger. And I loved Danny Granger, by the way, but I see a little more of the Paul George game in him. All right, Amen Thompson compared to Ja Morant, Dejounte Murray. The Dejounte Murray comparison is probably pretty good right now, aside from the fact that the Thompson twins like can't shoot like at all right now, which again, I'm not too worried about. Yes, it's something that they need to develop, but everybody likes to poke fun at the fact of like, oh, he's a Ben Simmons, he can't shoot or everything. Look, if every single player could defend, play make, right, be athletic, switch and guard everybody and shoot, everybody would be Kevin Durant, right? Or LeBron James. Like, you take what you get. He can literally do everything but shoot, him and his brother. And I think what's most interesting is their finishing ability. Like, it's not like finishing ability that I've really seen before, too. They have, like, really unique ways of using the glass to, like, get the ball in and stuff. They're really good at contorting their bodies. They hold in the air for so long, kind of like a Dejounte Murray or a Ja Morant. So I like those comparisons from like an athletic standpoint, but these guys are 11 out of 10 athletes. I say it all the time, and their defensive and just basketball IQ is off the charts. So the shot form will come and everything. Like Dejounte Murray's still not like a great 3-point shooter. At least he doesn't do it with a ton of consistency always. But Ja Morant, like obviously he has his moments with it as well. But I understand the lengthier guard that can play elite defense and play make. I get that. I actually think the Thompson twins have higher ceilings than probably Dejounte Murray. Ja Morant's a lot to ask of people, but I think they could be a lot more well-rounded players than Morant. I'm going to guess, yep, there's the other brother as well, who's arguably had a much better season, even though he's like coming off the bench now. I don't know what the Detroit Pistons are doing, but comparing him to Andre Iguodala, that's kind of an interesting one, actually. Yeah, like kind of young, athletic, defensive-oriented player. I would argue that Asar has a lot more IQ than Iguodala did when he first came into the league. But I understand, like they're playing a pretty similar role, so I actually really like that comparison for the teams that they're on. They had him going to the Wizards. Yeah, it was kind of a surprise that he went as high as he did, but man, he's awesome. He's always in the right place on the court. He's always making big defensive plays. Like there's no like thought behind him. He's just moving, and that's exactly what you want to see in those instincts in players. Again, shot form is rough right now, kind of like Iggy was early in his career. So I love that comparison, and I just love the Thompsons, man. I would want them on my team. Just having a guy that knows where to be on the basketball court is actually really hard to find in young players right now, especially for guys that came up through this like overtime elite league and everything. Who is teaching these guys this stuff? Because they're basically playing overglorified AAU. And with some of the coaches I was just talking to earlier, like we were just rapping on AAU and how dysfunctional it is and how hard it is to evaluate players because everyone's just kind of playing their own game, and every once in a while they happen to run into one of their own teammates. But somehow these two just got it figured out, man. Ooh, Jarris Walker. All right, this is going to be a tough one. Aaron Gordon. I don't know. Jarris Walker doesn't play very much. I guess I kind of see the comparison. He's like a bulkier body coming into the league that has some decent athleticism, but we just don't know. Aaron Gordon didn't really show much of anything in this league. I shouldn't say that. Like, he didn't really put the league on notice until he wasn't like a number 1 or 2 option on a team, which is for the best. Not everybody's going to be a 1 or 2 option, right? Until he got to Denver, and then he found his role. He fit it really well. They won a championship, right? Can't tell you much about Jarris Walker right now because he just doesn't play much. Victor Wembanyama, Anthony Davis, Kristaps Porzingis hybrid. Yeah, that's probably fair. Wemby is phenomenal already. We don't need to go into why he's phenomenal. Generational talent without a doubt and everything. I love the comparison between the two. He's kind of coming in as this like lengthy, scrawny dude right now that he's young. He'll put on some weight and everything. But with a ton more IQ than either of these dudes even had. Just like his basketball smarts, and I can just tell how much better he's playing the game than a lot of his teammates. Just knowing where to be on the court, filling in spots correctly. I love it. And obviously the Anthony Davis-Porzingis comparison is the fact that he's really tall. He plays great defense like Anthony Davis, but he can stretch out and space the floor a little bit like Porzingis. The difference being is his ball handling and his passing is like on another level, and that's what makes him a generational talent. I can't wait to see Wemby when he's got some more competent teammates around him. Cam Whitmore, one that fell in the draft quite a bit, ended up getting picked by Houston. Yeah, he was projected to go like top 10, and he fell like all the way to like 20 something. The Benedict Mathurin comparison is odd. It seems weird to compare someone to someone that was just like a rookie the previous year. Like that person doesn't even have an identity in the league, but I understand it where they're like, yeah, this is maybe not a tall guard, but like a stockier, bulky guard that can get above the rim and stuff and loves to attack the rim. That's what we've seen from Cam Whitmore whenever he's in the game. From what my connections have told me is a lot of his pre-draft interviews didn't go great. They thought his general IQ was a little bit low, and that's why he fell. So take that as you will. I don't know the guy, but I will say he doesn't necessarily play a smart game while he's on the court. Which, again, pros and cons to that. The cons are it's hard to play winning basketball with that. The pro is that he's just going out there trying to get buckets and trying to get stuff done, which, you love an attitude like that. If you can compare it with or combine that with a little bit of basketball IQ that you kind of teach him over the years, then you want to have that killer instinct in him, because, man, there's so many times where he has a really simple pass to make and it doesn't happen because he's like, I'm going to the rim right now and I'm trying to put you in it. That's awesome, right? That's cool. I'd really like for you to make that pass, though, or something, or maybe rotate here on defense or something like that. But, man, he's a very skilled player. And so if you can teach him the game a little bit, that's great. I won't compare him to Benedict Mathurin because I just think that's odd to compare him to a young player like that. But let's see if we can think of someone else that he's a good comparison for. I went to find some more comparisons of him, and I'm seeing this Caron Butler, Jay Crowder thing. No, those aren't good comparisons for him. So I don't really know what to call him. He's, I guess, kind of unique in that sense. I'm sure I could think of somebody if I thought hard enough, but I don't have all that time in the world. So let's just move on to the next person, which is, it's just going to be a conglomeration of other people. Balal Kulali, OG Anunoby. I see that, right? Coming into the league as a kind of a scrawny, lengthy dude that's defensive oriented, but has shown some 3-point potential. Yeah. I didn't know much about Anunoby coming into the league or anything. Koulibaly, obviously, I got to see a little bit more because I was watching Victor Wembanyama all the time, right? And what has always surprised me about Koulibaly this early is his ability to kind of read the defense, especially when they're closing him out. He gets to the rim really well afterwards. And, that's sometimes just having a rookie that's good at one thing early on offensively is a nice thing, because I think he's figuring out the game despite the fact that he's got some numbskulls on his team. So give Koulibaly a little more time, and I think you'll start to see a little more development. Kas Wallace compared to Drew Holiday. Apparently he's been compared to Holiday since high school. We haven't gotten to see much of that. Kaysen has been really, really good for the Thunder this year in the sense that he comes on the court as a backup point guard. He facilitates the offense really, really well. He takes open shots. He moves without the ball, which is nice for someone his size that he's capable of doing that. That lets you play with other elite guards in the NBA that aren't necessarily point guards, which that's going to make you some money in this league eventually. I can tell you that. But I don't know if I can see the Drew Holiday comparison, mostly because Drew Holiday was really good early on in his career. Y'all forget he made that all-star team early on, and then he had to leave for personal issues for a little bit. But I don't know if I see the defense being that elite. I don't know. I don't really see that. I see more of a Tyus Jones type in him, but with maybe a little more athleticism and scoring potential. So a more talented Tyus Jones, we'll call it. Very good at playing within his role, and I think he's going to make a lot of money as a quality backup guard in this league for a long time. Taylor Hendricks compared to Dorian Finney-Smith. I'm not going to touch this one too much either because he doesn't get to play much. There's a lot of vets on the team that play his position. They'll probably trade some of them over there in Utah. Then maybe we'll get to form some opinions on Mr. Hendricks. Jaylen Hood Shafino, another one, doesn't get to play much. They're comparing him to Spencer Dinwiddie. From the little bit I've seen of him, I kind of understand the comparisons. They have a lot of similar ball handling moves. I feel in a similar scoring style. A lot of getting the guy off balance, getting in the middle of the court, get a floater type of guy, right? But I don't know. Hood Shafino doesn't get to play too much right now. He's on a I don't want to not call them a contending team, but there's a team with a lot of studs on that team. So we'll wait to see with him. Kobe Buffkin, he's played 2 games in the NBA in total right now. So we're not going to look at that. Keontae George, that one's more interesting, comparing him to Cole Anthony. I could see why you'd think that coming out of college, because I would have really liked that comparison as well. He's oddly been kind of a facilitator first, point guard for the Jazz so far, which I didn't really see that. I kind of pictured him as an undersized 2, a Lou Will type, or a Cole Anthony type, right? Maybe he's not the primary ball handler, but he's coming off the bench to just go get you some buckets, because he's shown just an ability to make shots from anywhere on the court. Not quite like a Jordan Hawkins or something, but in that same realm. But no, yeah, he hasn't really been a Cole Anthony. He's just been kind of a facilitator, which is really interesting. I don't know exactly what to compare him to. I don't know exactly what to compare him to, but I liked the thought of him coming out of college like that, and I'm glad he's getting to play some starting point guard for them. That's someone for them to build around. All right, Jordan Hawkins. So we do get to talk about him. Awesome. The Malik Beasley comparison, I can kind of see it. He's like Malik Beasley in the sense that he's out there to go score, right? But he has a lot more ball handling abilities. He's a lot more capable of creating his own shot, but I think he's filling in kind of a similar role. He doesn't even really get to play for New Orleans now because they're so deep, and that's crazy. He was getting them like 14, 15 points a game as a rookie, and they don't have space for him. That says something. But I hope he gets to develop a little bit more into kind of that scoring role. He's kind of fitting the Cole Anthony role right now, except, man, he's a lethal shooter. Like, man, can that dude heat up? We should compare him to more of like a J.R. Smith type, but with a little more like ball handling responsibilities. Like, nobody was ever asking JR to play in a pick and roll or something, and Hawkins, they might do that down the line because he has like the ball handling skills. But no, man, he can go get buckets in a hurry. So yeah, those are some of the comparisons that were thought of before the draft. None of them as poor as maybe this Brook Lopez comparison for Derrick Lively, but no, these were interesting to look at nonetheless. And as the season continues to go, I love talking about the rookies and everything. One of my favorite parts about coaching in like college and everything was I always said I loved coaching the freshmen the most because there's kind of a blank slate, right? Like there's a lot to develop, there's a lot to grow. You're not asking them to do too much. More often than not, sometimes they do when they're really talented, right? But I just love seeing the development of people early on and seeing them grow. So I think it's interesting to look at stuff like this. But anyway, let me know what you guys think, what comparisons you have for some of these players, if we missed any of the top rookies or something, because there's always guys that perform that we didn't see coming, right? But anyway, thanks so much y'all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.